All right, so today we're going to be looking at some pretty intense stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going deep into Leviticus.
Oh, wow.
Chapters 16 and 17 to be exact.
Okay.
And, it's all about the Day of Atonement.
Right.
And the significance of blood in ancient Israel.
Interesting.
And, when you hear that, you might be thinking, ancient rituals. What does that have to do with my life in 2024?
Yeah, I can see that.
But trust me, there's some seriously relevant stuff in here for us today.
I think you might be right about that.
So, I'm really interested to hear your take on this.
Well, the Day of Atonement,
Yeah.
It wasn't just some random holiday,
Right.
This was the day the Israelites, as a whole nation,
Uh-huh.
they came face to face with their sin.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Mhm.
Aaron the high priest,
Yeah.
he's taking all the sins of the entire community,
Oh, wow.
all their wrongdoings, and putting them all on one single goat.
A scapegoat.
The scapegoat,
Wow.
exactly.
Wow.
And then sending that goat out into the wilderness.
I'm trying to picture this.
Yeah,
Like all the weight of a whole nation's sin
I know.
on this one animal.
Heavy stuff.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you think,
Without that.
do we ever really let go of our own guilt and shame, even after we've been forgiven?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
And it points to something even bigger here.
Okay.
The scapegoat.
Yeah.
It was pointing towards Jesus,
Okay.
who became the ultimate scapegoat.
Mm.
He took on the sins of all humanity.
Wow.
So for us today, the question is,
Yeah.
are we living in the freedom that Jesus' sacrifice gives us?
That's a good question.
Or are we still carrying the weight of our past?
It's easy to get stuck in those cycles
I know it is.
of guilt and regret.
Yeah.
But the ritual doesn't end there, right?
I guess should.
You're right. Doesn't Aaron do something else after the scapegoat is sent away?
You are on it today.
I get my homework.
So after that whole intense atonement thing, Aaron changes his clothes and washes himself. Okay.
It's like this powerful symbol of starting fresh, renewal, purification.
So what are those new clothes we need to put on
I like that.
after confessing and repenting?
Yeah. What are those things we can do? Like
Yeah.
forgiveness or serving others.
Right.
Things that make us really feel clean on the inside.
I like that. It's not just about saying sorry.
Right.
It's about taking action
Yes. Taking action to change.
to really experience that inner cleansing.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this intense scapegoat ritual, this
Right.
need for purification.
Uh-huh.
Then there's this whole thing about blood in Leviticus 17.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Okay, so Leviticus 17.1 says,
Okay.
"For the life of the flesh is in the blood."
Hmm.
So to the ancient Israelites, blood wasn't just like some bodily fluid,
Right.
It represented the essence of life itself,
Hmm?
like the life force.
Wow.
And God prohibited them from consuming blood.
Hmm.
And that underlined just how sacred it was.
So they couldn't eat anything that had blood in it.
Nope.
Why was that such a big deal?
Because to them, eating blood
Yeah.
would have been like disrespecting the giver of life.
Oh, I see.
It was all about recognizing how sacred life itself is.
That makes me think about how differently we treat life today.
Yeah,
Sometimes it feels like we've totally lost that sense of reverence,
I hear you.
There's so much violence
Yeah.
and carelessness,
Huh.
disregard for others.
It's true.
It's like we've forgotten how precious every single life really is.
You've hit on a huge point.
Yeah.
The way the ancient Israelites revered blood,
Right.
it's like the total opposite of how casually life can be treated today
Yeah,
in the 21st century.
it's true.
So the question for us is, how
Yeah.
can we get back to that sense of sanctity?
Yeah.
And not just for human life,
Right.
but for all life.
Okay.
Animals, the environment,
Yeah.
even our own spiritual lives.
That's a big question.
It is.
It's like we're being challenged to see the world through a whole new lens.
One that sees how valuable and sacred all living things are.
Exactly. And
Okay.
it all goes back to honoring the sacrifice that was made for us.
Okay.
If blood represents the source of life,
Yeah.
then Jesus's blood, which was shed for our sins,
Right.
represents the ultimate source of spiritual life.
Okay.
It's through his sacrifice that we have atonement,
Yeah.
that we are made clean.
So the question for us is, are we living in a way that honors that sacrifice?
I think so.
Does our everyday behavior really reflect the gift that we've been given?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
It is.
To live a life that's worthy of that grace.
Yeah.
But there's another piece to this that we need to look at.
Okay.
It's this idea of keeping things holy,
Oh, God.
setting them apart,
Mm.
just like God commanded with blood.
All right. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think about it this way. In Leviticus 17, God's command against consuming blood wasn't just about food. It was like this powerful metaphor for preserving what's holy.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this. So if blood represents life, and life is sacred,
Right.
then not consuming it is a way of showing respect, like keeping it set apart.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that some things are so sacred, so valuable, that they deserve to be treated differently. And this idea, it's not just about ancient rituals, you know?
Right.
This has implications for how we live our lives today.
Okay, so what are those sacred things in our modern lives? The things we need to be more intentional about protecting.
Think about it. Our time with God, our relationships, acts of worship, even our own bodies, these are all things that deserve intentional care and respect.
Well, I see what you mean.
It's about setting boundaries,
Okay.
setting things apart and treating them with reverence.
I love that it's like creating a sacred space
Yes.
in our lives, both physically and spiritually. But how does this connect back to the Day of Atonement?
Remember the Day of Atonement, it was all about restoring a right relationship with God.
Right.
And just like God set blood apart as holy, he also calls us to live holy lives.
Okay.
Not in like a legalistic way, but in a way that reflects how powerful his grace is, you know?
This is really making me rethink my whole approach to daily life.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting things done. It's about living with intention and purpose,
Yes.
aligned with God's heart.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's all connected, you
Yeah.
know? The Day of Atonement, it wasn't just about an outward ritual. It was about what's going on inside a change of the heart. And that transformation should change how we live, how we treat ourselves, others, and the world around us.
So even small everyday actions can be acts of honoring the sacrifice and living a set-apart life.
Absolutely. Every choice we make, every word we speak, every thought we entertain, it all matters. It's about aligning our lives with God's heart, recognizing how sacred everything he created is, and living in a way that shows his grace and mercy.
That's powerful. And it's definitely something I need to think more about. But it also raises a lot of questions for me, like how do we practically live this out in the midst of our busy, sometimes chaotic lives?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll keep exploring. But first, let's go back to something you mentioned earlier, the weight of guilt and shame we sometimes carry even after we've been forgiven.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like I'm constantly battling those negative thoughts and feelings.
I hear you. That's why the image of the scapegoat is so powerful, you know?
Yeah.
It reminds us that our sins have been carried away. They're gone. We don't have to carry that weight anymore.
But it's so hard to let go sometimes.
Yeah, it is. But remember, God doesn't want us to live weighed down by guilt and shame. He wants us to experience that freedom and joy that comes from knowing we are totally forgiven. And that freedom, it empowers us to live lives of purpose and gratitude.
So how do we actually step into that freedom? How do we silence those voices of condemnation and really embrace the truth of our forgiveness?
That's where the power of renewing our minds comes in. It's about intentionally choosing to focus on what God says is true instead of dwelling on our past mistakes. It's about replacing those negative thoughts with affirmations of God's love and grace.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. It's not just about acknowledging our sins. It's about actively choosing to believe and receive God's forgiveness and then letting that truth transform our thoughts, our actions, our entire lives.
You got it. And remember, transformation is a process, not something that happens overnight.
Right.
There will be times when those old feelings of guilt and shame try to come back, you know?
Yeah.
But in those moments, we need to remember what God has promised us and remind ourselves of the truth. We are forgiven, we are loved, and we are free.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to some new perspectives. We started with these ancient rituals, and now we've uncovered all these profound truths that still matter today.
I agree.
It's amazing how they connect to our everyday lives.
You're so right, and there's still so much more to uncover. We've only just scratched the surface of Leviticus 16 and 17 and what they mean for us today. But we've covered a lot of ground in this part.
We have. When we come back, we'll go even deeper into what it looks like to live a set-apart life in 2024. Stay with us.
Okay, so we're back.
We are.
And ready to wrap up our deep dive into Leviticus 16 and 17.
Sounds good.
We've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Scapegoat ritual, the sanctity of blood, the importance of forgiveness, renewing our minds.
Yeah.
But the big question is,
Yeah.
how do we actually live out these ancient truths
Right.
in our modern world?
That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bridging the gap
Right.
between ancient wisdom and 21st century living.
I like that.
And I think the answer is
Yeah.
realizing that holiness isn't just about outward rituals or avoiding certain things.
Okay.
It's about a change that happens on the inside, An inward transformation that affects every area of our lives.
This is not about following a bunch of rules.
Exactly. It's about letting God's grace change us from the inside out.
I see.
It's about aligning our hearts, our minds, and our actions with His will.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
But if I'm being honest, it can feel a little overwhelming.
I understand.
Life is so busy and demanding.
Yeah, it is.
Where do we even begin to live this kind of set-apart life?
I think it starts with small steps.
Oh?
It's about making deliberate choices each day that reflect God's values. Being mindful of our thoughts, our words, and our actions.
Could you give me some examples?
Sure, let's start with our relationships.
Okay.
How can we treat others with the same reverence for life that God showed in Leviticus? Maybe it means choosing kindness instead of criticism, patience instead of frustration, forgiveness instead of resentment.
That makes sense. It's about recognizing that every person has worth and dignity, no matter their background or their beliefs.
Exactly. And remember, this applies to how we treat ourselves, too.
Oh, right.
Are we treating our bodies with respect? Taking care of our emotional and spiritual well-being?
It's easy to forget about those things when life gets crazy.
It is, but we are God's masterpiece, created in His image. Just like He set blood apart as holy, we need to see ourselves as sacred too, worthy of care and respect.
This is making me rethink my priorities.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting things done.
Right.
It's about living with intention and purpose.
Yes.
Aligned with God's heart.
Exactly.
But what about our time with God? How do we prioritize that when we're so busy?
That's a great question, and I think it comes back to setting things apart.
Okay.
Just like God told the Israelites not to eat blood.
Yeah.
We need to make time for Him.
Okay.
Time that's free from distractions and other demands.
So it's not just about saying a quick prayer before bed.
It's about creating a sacred space, both physically and mentally,
Okay.
where we can really connect with God on a deeper level.
I like that.
It might mean waking up earlier to pray and meditate,
Okay.
or setting aside time each day to read the Bible and think about what it means.
And this is starting to feel less overwhelming and more like an invitation.
It is an invitation.
An invitation to experience freedom and joy
Yes.
that come from living a life that's aligned with God's will.
That's exactly what it is. It's an invitation to experience the fullness of life that He has for us. It's an invitation to experience the peace, the purpose, and the power that come from living set apart for His glory.
Wow. As we wrap up this deep dive into Leviticus 16 and 17,
Yeah,
I'm feeling a sense of awe and wonder.
I feel it too.
These ancient rituals and commands, they're not just outdated rules from the past.
Right.
They're timeless truths
They are.
that speak to who we are
Yes.
as human beings,
Yeah.
created in God's image.
You said it perfectly as you go about your week.
Yeah.
I want to encourage you to think about these truths.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what small changes can you make to live with more intention, more reverence, more gratitude? How can you honor the sacrifice that was made for you and live a life that reflects God's holiness?
That's a powerful challenge and one I'm ready to embrace. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truth that sets us free.